In a small village nestled between rolling hills and whispering streams, there lived a woman in a tiny house by the corner of the village of Igbodudu. Her name was Ajoke, a tall woman, slim like the stem of the Iroko. Her skin glowed dark and rich like roasted palm kernels. Her eyes, almond-shaped, sharp as though they could see straight into your secrets. Her nose was broad and noble, and when she smiled, her face seemed carved by the gods. Ajoke was a storyteller, a well-known one at that. Her storytelling began by accident. One evening, while strolling, she met two restless children quarreling by the stream. To calm them, she told a story about a tortoise who stole fish and lost his tail in the process. The children laughed, made friends with Ajoke, who in return promised to tell the children another story the next day at a particular baobab tree location. So, the children made peace, the quarrels forgotten, and they ran happily and eagerly to tell their friends. The next evening, the two children brought two of their friends each, and an extra of 4 children came. Then the next day they increased. Gradually, the children increased to 8, then 12, then 20. Soon, the children in the entire village would break their mats, benches to sit and gather at the famous old baobab tree every day as the sun set to listen to Auntie Ajoke's stories, as she was fondly called. The children soon created a song for Auntie Ajoke to welcome her whenever it was time for her to tell her stories. The moment that time came, and they sight Auntie Ajoke, they would clap their hands, singing. Auntie Ajoke, hearing the song, would dance to meet the children and would greet them all wholeheartedly. To the children, she was more than a woman. She was magic. Her stories carried colors brighter than the rainbow. Her laughter softer than the evening breeze. Soon enough, adults began to join too. Traders, farmers, even elders, after each day of them walking, found themselves sitting in the circle, waiting for Ajoke to tell her stories filled with wisdom. Ajoke had her own special chair, thanks to the furniture maker. Inspired by her stories, carved her a special wooden chair, broad, smooth with carvings of suns and moons. That chair was brought by the children, placed under the baobab tree, and when Ajoke sat, her voice and her stories flowed like a river. Ajoke's gift of telling stories had been in action and had saved lives, healed wounds, melted hearts of the most notorious, and even saved an entire village. Instances where Ajoke's stories helped her life was with the case of a naughty and notorious boy, Jaga, whose parents dragged him to Ajoke's gathering, but he crossed his arms, scowling. And during the course of Auntie Ajoke's stories, like the children fondly called her, the story touched Jaga, and on getting home, he made a promise to himself and to his parents to never be naughty and notorious again, and from that day, Jaga turned a new leaf. There were several other instances where her stories helped save a life, like how Atinuke's marriage was saved by just listening to Ajoke's stories, and learning and being inspired by them. Or was it when the neighboring village came to fight with the people of Igbodudu and accused them of theft, causing terror, uproar, and a lot of panicking in Igbodudu? And Ajoke decided to step in to help by telling a beautiful story, and that was how our village was saved. And instead of the neighboring village to fight that day with the people of Igbodudu, they decided to make peace and live happily in one accord with one another. Ajoke's stories even inspired kings and royal houses, and whenever the royal palace had an occasion, Ajoke was always brought to tell her beautiful stories. It was no secret that Ajoke was blessed with the wisdom, ability and gift to touch hearts with her words and stories. But while Ajoke's voice carried joy to the world, at night inside her home, silence was her companion. Ajoke would go home, close her door, and weep. She was originally not from the village of Igbodudu. Auntie Ajoke, an only child and an orphan with no parent at all, came from a town called Irake. She was a newly wedded woman. Her husband was from Irake also, and their marriage was filled with love. And months later after the wedding, Ajoke took in and became pregnant. But tragedy struck the day of her delivery. That morning, her husband had bid her farewell with a beautiful kiss on her cheek and headed out to start his day as a factory worker at a biscuit company. But hours later, some of her husband's colleagues came to Ajoke's home bearing bad news about her husband. One of the machines was loosed unknowingly and had fallen on her husband, and he died. On hearing the news, Ajoke, who was 7 months pregnant, went into induced labor. She was rushed to the town's clinic and was operated on because she didn't have enough strength to push her babies due to the cries of her husband, who had just passed, so she became very weak. Hours after operation, the doctor who had operated on Ajoke brought another bad news that her twins that she was expecting didn't survive due to the suffocation in the womb. Ajoke couldn't believe what she heard. A day that seemed like a normal, joyous day soon became a day of sadness and disgrace for her. She was devastated. Few days later, the villagers started murmuring. "She is cursed," they said. Her husband and children all died in one day. Some people claimed she was a witch and that she sacrificed all of them in order to attain position in the evil kingdom. Soon enough, the people of Irake began to hurl insult on Ajoke. They spat on her, ridiculed her publicly, and sometimes some children would throw stones at her shouting, "Ajoke the cursed" or "Ajoke the misfortune carrier," while other children were warned sternly never to associate themselves with Ajoke or as much as greet her. So both the young and old people of Irake distanced themselves from Ajoke, including her in-laws, because they didn't want her energy to be contagious. And Ajoke soon became a shadow of herself. She didn't go out during the day, for she feared they could stone her to death. One day, Ajoke decided to go fetch water at night, since she couldn't go during the day because of the public disgrace she would face if she went out. On her way to fetch water, she overheard some youths planning to come burn down her house with her in it the next morning before sunrise. Ajoke, on hearing this, quickly returned back to the house and packed what had value to her, like the beaded hand and leg chain she always wore, a picture that had a drawing of her husband, a little box that contained the little savings from her husband, the beautiful plate that her husband had once bought for her when he was alive. Few clothes that also included a baby girl's clothes and a baby boy's clothes to remind her about her babies she lost to the cold hands of death. And that night, Ajoke left the village of Irake, walking through the thick forest that made her scared. She journeyed for days without proper food, just the fruits she had left from her house that she took along with her. Days later, Ajoke arrived at the village of Igbodudu, where no one knew her sorrow. There she saw a small little house towards the end of the village. She asked for the owner from some of the farmers she saw around that little house, and they said the little house had been abandoned for years. She asked if she could take over, and she was given the permission to live there. Ajoke entered the small house and cleaned it up, turning it into her small little cozy space, where she found peace, though the people in that area found it strange that she chose a small abandoned old house to live in, but they didn't care as long as she didn't cause trouble. The people of Igbodudu were known to be receptive, and foreigners often came to dwell among them, so they didn't read much meaning to it. However, Ajoke never really related, associated or made friends with anyone. She practically distanced herself from people in the community. She started afresh, started a new life, a new quiet and lonely beginning. No one in Igbodudu knew where she came from. The first few months of Ajoke's arrival to Igbodudu was lonely and mysterious because she didn't have anyone to turn to, and she didn't want to trust anyone. Every 4 market days, she would take the basket she had weaved down and take it to one corner of the market to sell there. so she could eat for the next few days. That was how Ajoke lived for almost 2 years, until she met the two restless children quarreling by the stream the evening she was strolling, and she decided to settle the disagreement, and that was how her storytelling began. But while she healed others with her stories, her own loneliness remained. No children to call her mother, no husband that would sit by her side. For in one day, she lost her husband and newborn children. Her chair was empty, her bed cold. The walls of her hut knew her tears, the pillow knew her loneliness, but the village only knew her smile. Ajoke every night before sleeping would cry her eyes out, remembering her husband, her children, and how the people of Iraq treated her instead of sympathizing with her. Ajoke believed she was telling stories to fill others with joy. She never knew the stories were slowly stitching the torn fabric of her own soul. She always wore a beaded hand and leg chain everywhere she went, and people often wondered why. Some believed it was her good luck charm that gave her power to spin endless tales. No one dared ask, and so Ajoke's beaded hand and leg chain became part of a mystery. Another mystery about Ajoke was that she never accepted any gift that was given to her. She refused gold, she refused jewels, she refused every gift. Whenever someone tries giving her a gift, she would say, "A storyteller must never be richer than the stories themselves." So she chose the hut, small, hidden, and silent. Close enough for the people to hear her words, far enough so no one could hear her tears. But what people didn't know was that she protected herself from people knowing who she was or anything about her. She thought to herself that if she starts collecting gifts, she would be rich, and people from other villages would start coming, and she feared the people of Iraq. So because of that, she preferred her little hut and her little basket weaving. Whenever anyone tried to visit her, she would smile gently and say, "Don't worry, I'm fine. You don't need to come in." One day, the villagers concerned tried to visit her home, knocking gently, but she met them at the door, never letting anyone in. The villagers who were concerned said, "Let us help you. You give us so much light." She smiled faintly, but behind those smiles was a heavy and sad heart. "No, don't worry, I am perfectly fine. Stories are my home," Ajoke would say. The little children she told stories to one day asked Ajoke. They said, "Auntie Ajoke, why do you live in that little hut? Why not in the grand homes people offer to give you?" And Ajoke would repeat the same words she told them. "My children, a storyteller must never be richer than the stories themselves." And so, though Ajoke lived among them, no one ever truly stepped into her world. One story after another, Ajoke spoke of kings and queens, of cunning tortoises and brave maidens, of rivers that listened and skies that answered. Her voice painted the night sky, and her hands moved like a weaver, threading lessons into every tale. Soon, people from faraway villages traveled miles just to hear Ajoke. Unknowingly to Ajoke, her name soon became a song. She became the heartbeat of the community of Igbodudu without her realizing it. Auntie Ajoke had a secret admirer. He was a farmer, a well-known farmer, at least not to her, because she had no idea who he was. His name was Kola, the elderly bachelor who always said he never found the one, but quietly admired Ajoke from afar. Kola was often marveled and mesmerized by her stories, and even admired her looks, but Ajoke paid no attention to him because of her past. To Kola, she was a woman whose silence carried the weight of 1,000 stories. Kola often patronized Ajoke by buying her weaved basket on market days. Sometimes, he buys a lot claiming he needs them to carry his farm produce, which wasn't true. He only wanted to get Ajoke's attention. But one fateful evening, everyone sat under the baobab tree waiting for Ajoke to come tell her stories as usual, but they didn't see her. They waited and waited till night came, and the crowd, both old and young, decided to go to her house and check up on her. On getting there, they heard a noise coming from Ajoke's hut. They walked hurriedly to her hut and met Ajoke soaked in her own tears. They asked her what was wrong, because they had never seen her sad or cry. And for the first time, words refused to come. The children's eyes widened. The adults leaned forward. Silence filled the air. Then Ajoke whispered, almost to herself, I have told you stories of brave souls, yet I have been afraid to tell you my own. Gasp rippled through the crowd. Ajoke began to speak, not of tortoises, not of kings, not of rivers, but of herself, her pain, her loneliness, her night of tears. The crowd was silent, even the cricket hushed. And then something magical happened. A woman in the crowd stood and said, Ajoke, you are not alone. We are your family. A man added, your stories gave us strength. Now let us give you ours. The villagers, one by one, pledged their love, their gift, their hands, their hearts. Ajoke wept openly, but this time there were tears of healing. From that day, Ajoke was no longer just a village storyteller. She became the village small mother to little children, sister, friend, and guide. Her pain had birthed her power, and her voice became the bridge between broken hearts. And Kola, after hearing her story, felt more drawn to her, not out of pity, but love. And they became friends who were fond of each other and ended up as lovers and getting married to each other and bearing children for Kola. Ajoke's fame spread beyond the hills. Kings invited her to their courts, merchants gave her gifts, travelers carried her name far and wide. Even the people of Iraq heard about her story, and those who maltreated her eventually traveled to beg for her forgiveness. Those who mocked her rejoiced with her. She also moved out of her hut, eventually to a beautiful and better place. Soon, Ajoke became a wealthy, talented, and popular storyteller, and her husband Kola supported all through. Ajoke wasn't just a storyteller to the people of Igbodudu, she was their heart. She made Igbodudu more popular. And so, Ajoke taught the world that the greatest power is not in strength or wealth, but in the stories we carry, the wisdom we share, and the love we give. The children still sang her song, but this time, Ajoke danced with laughter that reached her soul. What became her pain soon became the reason for her joy. Dear viewers, sometimes the very gift we give to others is the same gift that will save us and help us. Ajoke thought she was healing others, but through her stories, she healed herself. So remember, your story is your gift. Share and help others with it. You may not know whose life depends on it, including your own. Your voice is not small. Your story is not useless. Your gift or talent is not little. What you share and do might just be the medicine the world and your own heart needs. And so, the story of Ajoke lives on. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know your thoughts in the comment section. See you next time.